Hello guys, and today I'm excited to be sharing this tutorial with you, and in this tutorial we'll be creating a watch GUI display in form of a fake hologram. So the software we're using today is Adobe After Effects 2023. Without further ado, let's jump right into the tutorial. So as you can see, I'm right inside Adobe Photoshop, and as you can see, I have a basic design of a watch. And I've separated each element in its own layer. As you can see, I created each element in its own separate layer, and they are all saved as a Photoshop document. As you can see, this is where I already saved it inside my Explorer. When you have your footage you'll be working with already inside After Effects, all you have to do is you import the PSD file. You go to File and you try to import the file. You locate where you save your Photoshop document. As you can see, arttrade.psd, a Photoshop document file. Then I'm going to import it. The kind of import will be set to composition, and the layer options, I'll make sure the table layer style is selected. I'll click OK. So we now have a composition of arttrade in our project. I'll double click to open the composition. As you can see, we all have all the elements we created inside Photoshop inside our After Effects project. I'll be deleting the layout 0 because I don't need it. And all I have to do now is I'm going to try and create a rounded rectangle. I'll click on the rounded rectangle tool, and I'll make sure the fill is set to solid color, and also the color will be set to white, and the stroke also I'll make sure it's set to solid color. I'll click OK, and the stroke width is 3 pixels. Also, the stroke color will be set to white. As you can see, the rulers I created in Photoshop is right here, so I'll be using it as guide in creating this rounded rectangle. I'm going to open up the rectangle content. Under the rectangle path, I'm going to increase the roundness to about, let's say, 200. I'm going to close that up. Now I'm going to move it just below all the elements. So I'm going to the fill, and I'm going to make sure I bring down the opacity to about, let's say, 22%. Then I'm going to click OK. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to auto trace the art icon just to have it on its own separate layer so we can manipulate it. I'm going to the layers, auto trace, and I'm going to leave all the settings as default. But make sure apply to a new layer is checked. Then you click OK. As you can see, our art icon has been auto traced. So I'm going to click and bring it down. Then I'm going to get rid of the old art icon, and I'm going to rename this to art. So I'll go to my effect and preset. I'm going to search for the effect fill under the generate. I'm going to apply it, and I'm going to change the color to a little bit, let me say deep red, not too deep. I think that's okay. So I'm going to make sure I bring in the anchor point to the center. I will control where I double click on the pan behind anchor point tool, and it's going to bring it right in the center. So the next thing for us to do is I'm going to carefully zoom in, and I'm going to press S while I select the art layer. I'll click the stopwatch icon to create a keyframe. Then I'm going to move for about 5 frames. I'm going to change the scale to about 110. So I'm going to disable the marks just like that, so you can see what we're working on perfectly. So I'm going to zoom out. Then I'm going to move for about another 5 frames. Then I'm going to click on the first keyframe. I'll copy and I'm going to paste. Then I'll also move for another 5 frames, and I will do the same for the next keyframe. I'll click on it, copy, and I'm going to paste. I'm going to click and drag over all the keyframes, and I'm going to move about 5 frames, and I'm going to copy and I'm going to paste it. So I'm going to repeat that again. As you can see, we already have our art animating. So the next thing for us to do now is to recreate our 102 BPM. so we can have full control of the animation. So I'm going to select my type 2 and I make sure the character is set to Arial, and I'm going to type 0. I'm going to select my type 2 and I'll make sure the font is set to Arial. So let me try and increase the font size to about 309. Then I'm going to do the same just to bring the anchor point right in the center. So I'm going to select my type 2 again and I'm going to type BPM. I'm going to select it and I'm going to reduce the font size drastically, just like that. So I also do the same and bring back the anchor point to right in the center. I'm going to move it right in place, just the way we have it in our original design. So what we're going to do now is we're going to animate that 0 because it's going to count up to about 102. So I'm going to create a new adjustment layer and I'm going to bring it just above the 0 text. I'm going to rename it and I'm going to call this slider control. So I'm going to select it and under my effect and preset, I'll search for the effect called slider and I'm going to apply the effect on our slider controls. So at the beginning of our animation, I'm going to open up the 0 text. Under the source text, I'm going to alt click. I'm going to open up our slider control and I'm going to open up the effects and open up the slider. So I'm going to point it to where we have our slider on the slider control, or let me say in the slider control. Then I'm going to create a keyframe on the slider and I'm going to try and zoom in gently and I'm going to move for about, let's say 10 frames, and I'm going to set the value of the slider to 102. As you can see, trying to preview this, we're getting all this in floats. We just need it to be in whole number. So what we have to do is we need to do a little bit of rounding up. You don't really need to be a programmer for you to understand how to round up numbers. But under our expression controls, we just add math.round. Then we open parentheses. We're not going to close it yet, we'll close it at the end of the code. So as you can see, that rounded up to a whole number. I'm going to close that up and I'm going to select it and I'm going to try and adjust the fonts and make it fit into our design. So I'm going to also bring back the anchor point in the center, just like that. So let's have a quick preview. So I'm going to come to the beginning of my timeline and I'm going to try and create a new adjustment layer. And I'm going to search for the effects called hue and saturation. I will apply it on the new adjustment layer. And we are going to try and change some things here. All we are trying to do here is we are trying to create a kind of glitching effect. I'm going to create a keyframe on the color range and I'm going to bring the master lightness to -100. I'll move about 2 frames. I'm going to move the master lightness to about 100. I'm going to open that up and I'm going to select all my keyframes. I'll move to 4 frames and I'm going to copy and paste. Also move to 8 frames and I'm going to paste the keyframes accordingly. Let me zoom out. Then I'll move for about another 2 frames. Then I'm going to bring the master lightness to 4. So let's have a quick preview. So what we tried to create here was sort of glitch animation that opens up the watch UI. I'm going to my main composition and under my project, I'm going to click on add trade composition and I'm going to import it just like that. So I'm going to press S to bring up the scale and I'm going to reduce the scale to about 25% and I'll try to move it in position just like that. So at the beginning of my animation, I need to get rid of the opacity. I'm going to press it to bring up the opacity and I'm going to create a keyframe by clicking the stopwatch icon. I'm going to change value to 0% and I'm going to move about 5 frames and I'm going to change the opacity value to 100%. So as you can see, fades in nicely. So I think let me adjust it and move it to about 10 frames. I think it's better this way. So the next thing I'm going to do now is the beginning of my animation. I'm going to press S to bring up the scale. So before we apply the scale animation, we need to bring the anchor point to the bottom left corner. You select the pan behind anchor point tool and you click and drag it just like that. Press S to bring up my scale and I'm going to create a keyframe. I'll press U to review all the keyframes. Then I move to the beginning of the animation, which is the beginning of the timeline. And I'm going to change the scale to 0. So as you can see, we are getting there. It's popping up properly and I think just few adjustments, then we're good to go. I'm going to first of all turn on the motion blur. Then I'm going to right click and create a new null object. So I'll select the video layer, then I'm going to Windows Tracker. So we need to track motion. So as you can see, let's zoom in here. Our track point boxes should be around where in the video or where you want the reference or where you want the tracking to be pointing at. So we're going to zoom in and try to adjust our boxes. In this reference, we are trying to track our watch. So we are going to drag and move the boxes and make sure they are pointing to the watch. We're going to analyze forward and let After Effects do the tracking itself. So when it's done, you edit targets and you make sure it is set to null. Then you click OK. Then all we have to do is we make sure our art rate layer is pointing directly to the null 1 layer. So after doing that, all you have to do is you click on apply, so it's going to apply on the X and Y axis. So as you can see, the graphics is slightly out of frame. All you have to do is we can adjust this. This is not an issue. You click and you drag and try and move it in position where you want the graphics to be. So I think that's okay. You can make further adjustments later. So the next thing for us to do is I'm going to turn my art rate into a 3D layer. Then I'm going to adjust the Z rotation. And I'm also going to adjust the X rotation and also the Y rotation just to give it some perspective. So let's have a quick preview. So right now I can say it's close to perfection and our animation is looking great. So you can try and adjust the art rate layer and try and bring it to wherever you want it to be in the video. This is subjective to you. If you've gained or you've learned anything in this video, please do well to subscribe to this channel, hit the like button and make sure you turn on the notification bell icon so you'll be notified when next I drop another content just like this.